Genesis 19, we just saw, the whole situation with Lot. And one of the things I think about with Lot, when he moved to Sodom and Gomorrah, remember why he moved there? Because he had such big cattle and herds and all that, and his shepherds and those types of ones that were overseeing the cattle were fighting with Abraham's because they were both had so many. And so Abraham's like, hey, let's separate. You just go wherever you want. I'll go the opposite way. It's all good. I mean, what a great way to solve a problem. And Lot's like, ooh, that's the best area right down there in Sodom and Gomorrah. In that area, the plain was really, really rich. And so he's like, I'll go down there with all my flocks and stuff. But yet, and then we see him in tents and that, and kind of living outside the city when the king comes and captures. And then later we see him living in the city. Where's all his flocks? Where's all of his riches? Because now, when he leaves Sodom and Gomorrah, it's not him and a bunch of flocks and a bunch of stuff and a bunch of cattlemen and a bunch of shepherds and right? It's just him, his 2 daughters, and his wife. His wife looks back, so now it's just him and his 2 daughters. That's it. I mean, basically, he's lost all of those blessings that he got. How did he get those blessings? From God. And because he was close to Abraham, right? It was those blessings rubbing off. The closer you are in fellowship with righteous people, the closer you are in fellowship with God and with those that are in fellowship with God, the more blessings you're going to have in your life. But you start distancing yourself from that. Now you're fellowshipping with the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. The New Testament talks about, a righteous man was, waxed. Or, you got corrupted. That's what it talks about in different words. But, I mean, that corruption rubs off on you, and all of a sudden you end up losing all those blessings, and you lose all that possibilities that you have. Now it's just him and his daughters. And remember, God said, you need to go there. And he's like, oh, no, I don't want to go there. Let me go to this city. And so he goes to the city and stays there for a little bit. The city's name is Zorah, I guess. So in Genesis 19:30, Lot and his 2 daughters left Zorah and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zorah. Remember? The angels are taking him out of the city. He's afraid to go to the mountains. So he says, I'm going to go to Zorah. I'm going to go to the city. Okay, you can go there. And God doesn't destroy it and lets him go there. Now he's there. Now he's like, oh, I'm afraid to be here. I'm going to go to the mountains.
You know what God did, right?
Yes. You know what would have been an even better choice for him, maybe? He had a relative in the area that would have took him in, right? He had a relative in the area that maybe even had a son or 2, or had some workers that were noble men that maybe needed some wives, and he had these daughters that it would be nice for them to have some good husbands. Maybe he could have went back to old Lot. Hey, Uncle Lot, I've been having some issues. What do you think Lot would have done? You think he would have cast him out or throw him away or say, you can't come? He would have welcomed him with open arms. But he doesn't. He's afraid. He's afraid and afraid and afraid. And so he goes to the mountains. So now it's just him and his 2 daughters living in a cave. Wow. So you go from traveling with Abraham with so much stuff, you guys got to separate, to living in a tent where you get captured and Abraham gets you freedom, to living in a little apartment in Sodom and Gomorrah, to living in Zoar with just your daughters, to living in a cave. Wow, what a great example of what it's like as we walk away from our heritage, walk away from godliness, walk away from righteousness. That's what it'll do. It'll chip it away, piece by piece by piece by piece. And if you don't repent and turn away, living in a cave with his 2 daughters, How much fun is that? Two women just nagging him all the time. So he's in this cave, and one day the older daughter said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to lie with us, as is the custom all over the earth. Let us get our father to drink wine, and then lie with him and preserve our family line through our father." So they're living in a cave. There's so many cave paintings you can make before you get bored. So many rocks you can throw up against the wall. And they get bored, and they're thinking their life's kind of running down. Their father's old. There's no men around. No one for them to marry, which they were engaged at the time of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So they were thinking about getting married, having kids. They're like, this is the way all around the earth. This is what we want to do. And so she comes up with this wonderful plan. We'll get Lot drunk, and we'll sleep with him without sleeping, and have some babies by our father. Wow. Talk about corruption coming into a righteous family, huh? Whoa. So that night, verse 33, they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went and lay with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. The next day, the older daughter said to the younger, "Last night I lay with our father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight, and you go in and lay with him, so we can preserve our family line through our father." So they got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter went and lay with him again. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son and named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger daughter had a son, and she named him Ben-Ammi. He is the father of the Amorites of today. And so their plan works. They both get pregnant. I wonder what the conversation was like. You know, they said Lot doesn't even know that had happened. They got him so drunk. I don't know. That's pretty drunk, I guess. Especially from wine. I don't know how much wine you have to drink to get that drunk. But anyway, they said he didn't know. So I wonder what the conversation's like when he finds out they're both pregnant. There's no men. How? Well, remember, 6 months ago, you got a little tipsy. No indication what any of those conversations like. Anyway, so they have these two children, and these children become great nations. The Moabites and the Amorites, we'll read about them throughout the Old Testament. They are ones that cause a lot of problems for Abraham, although not everything is bad, but a lot of problems. They want to call curses down on the Israelites, bringing Balaam, the story with the donkey. They come up with plans like, okay, if we can't destroy them from the outside, we'll go to the inside. Let's get their boys to marry our women, and then they'll take over the practices. And the Amorites had a god that was just horrible, that was even more detestable than these other false gods that were around, because he demanded human sacrifice, and they would sacrifice by fire, and they would sacrifice children by fire. To Moloch is what the Israelites called him, because they didn't even want to pronounce his name. But just detestable practices and stuff, and so much problem along the way. But the thing I want to think about is, as we look at different characters in the Old Testament, and how principles around them and how it applies to us, Lot's children, even though it was through incestuous relationship with his daughters, even though, there was so many other options they could have done, but they didn't, like going back to Abraham, finding some husbands for them, because this was obviously a strong desire they had. Instead of doing that, and even though it was all, just corrupt, so much corruption involved in their lives, they still received the blessings of God in becoming great nations. And you can see that if you as we follow it throughout the Old Testament, and we'll see them come up again later if we go, depending on how far down we go into the Old Testament. And the idea is, you can receive blessings from God without receiving the promise of God. Now, God brought redemption in a small way in that there is a Moabite in Jesus' line. You know who that is? Anybody know who it is? Yes, Ruth. Yes. Yep, Ruth and Boaz. Yeah. And so God, even though this was so corrupt, was even to take at least one out of that corrupt line and bring it into Jesus. Praise God for his redemption principles and the fact that no matter how corrupt something is, God can turn it to good. Doesn't mean this should have been done. Doesn't mean any of this was a good idea. But he still was able to bring at least that Ruth in, who becomes...
Having the foresight. He knew it was going to happen before it did.
Oh, yeah.
And it is so amazing. There's no way you can measure the knowledge that he had.
Well, the thing we don't understand with God is he is here right now just as much as he is with Lot.
Yes.
Then he's there now with him. There's no separation to us it happened in the past, to God it's happening right now. In the same way what happens to us 3 weeks from now, God is there right now, 3 weeks from now, experiencing it with us. And yet he's here because he's outside of time.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard concept for us to understand because we're so trapped in time. I like one of the illustrations where it's like, it's like being at a parade. You're standing on the corner at a parade. You only see what's coming past that corner. But God's like in a helicopter above the parade. He sees everything that's happening in it. So that's kind of one way to look at it. But the concept I want to focus in on is the idea of blessings of God without the promises of God. There are people, there are nations, there are different ones that because of their closeness to blessings, like the Israelites receive blessings from God, but they don't receive the promise of God unless they go through Jesus Christ.
Right.
So right now, Israel is a very blessed nation. You see them, this small little nation surrounded by enemies that want to destroy them, and yet they are thriving. They make some of the most amazing technology advancements. They are able to take the water and desalinize it out of the ocean and provide water where there's desert. There's places that were total barren deserts that are now blooming with the most amazing flowers and fruits and all those types of things. They're able to produce and feed and share with others because of the blessings of God. So they have the blessings of God, just like the Moabites got the blessings of God, Lot got the blessings of God, but they didn't get the promise. They didn't get the promised land. The Israelites did through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the only way that today the Israelites can receive the true promise of God is by accepting Jesus Christ as Lord. As servants of Jesus Christ, we bring blessings into our lives. We bring blessings into our families' lives, friends, neighbors. We can bring blessings, and there are people that can receive blessings from God without the promise of God. And a blessing from God without the promise of God isn't really all that great. I mean, it can help you in this life, right? It can give you some things. There are people that have giftings from God. They have abilities from God. They have talents from God. But they may never experience the promise of God because they use them for themselves. They use them to bring glory to themselves. They use them to provide for themselves. They use it all for them, and they never surrender to Jesus Christ and use it for his kingdom and his glory.
Right.
And that's sad. Isn't that sad to see how Lot, he's following the same path that Abraham is, as Abraham's following God. He's receiving some of the same blessings that Abraham is, as Abraham's following God. And instead of really selling out and following Abraham's God, he goes his own way, brings all this corruption, and it's going to lead to just torment and persecution and problems for the Israelites for years to come.
Yes.
I mean, how sad is that? The opportunity was there.
Abraham made God number one.
Yeah.
Lot did not.
No.
Lot was more towards the flesh than Abraham.
I think Lot made Lot number one.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, even after his wife, turns around and turns to a pillar of salt, do you really hear anything about Lot, like, grieving or, anything like that? Or, because when you read some of the other characters in the Old Testament, when their spouses pass away, you hear in the words that, man, they that pained them. That was a loss for them. Lot's just kind of going on being, no, I'm afraid I'm going to go here. Oh, I'm afraid I'm going to go here. He was captured by the kings that went and captured Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham freed him. Wouldn't you, there's safety with Abraham. Man, I messed up. At least the prodigal son, when he was in the pig pen, came to his senses and went home. If Lot in the cave would have came to his senses and said, man, I was doing a whole lot better when I was hanging out with Abraham.
Maybe God didn't want Lot with Abraham, though. Because he could have brought that corruption back in there, too.
And that's a distinct possibility. And that may be why the angels didn't suggest go to Lot or go to Abraham. But the angels were like, no, you go up there. And then he wanted to go in. Yeah. And that is something that God will do. And that brings up an excellent point. I'm glad you said that, because God will help us go on the path we're going on.
Yes.
So if we draw nigh unto God, he draws nigh unto us. If we turn away from God, he turns away from us, helps us go down that path. So Lot is on this path he wants to go on, right? And God, instead of saying, why don't you go over to Abraham, right? He gave him that chance now. When he was captured, when Abraham freed him from that captivity and all that stuff, that would have been a good chance for him to repent. He understood before he ever moved into the city and he was losing all of his stuff and possessions. That would have been a good chance to. So it's not that God didn't give him an opportunity to do it. But since Lot wants to keep going down this path, instead of God saying, hey, why don't you go to Abraham? He's like, yeah, okay, go up in the mountains. Go up in the cave and see what happens.
He had to make his own mistake.
You've been sowing to the flesh. Time to reap. You're going to make a beautiful crop of Moabites and Amorites. And I'll bless them. And I'll give them some land. And they'll be a powerful people and nation. And I'll even bring some redemption through Ruth. But you know what? Look at what else they produce. A God that wants child sacrifices, destruction, corruption, perversion of all kinds. Good job, Lot. And for Abraham, right, because he kept wanting to turn toward God and move to him, God keeps bringing him. And even when God's going down to Sodom and Gomorrah, he's like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Can you imagine? God had such a friendship type of relationship with Abraham, right? He's a friend of God. Yeah. That he's going to say, I'm not going to do this without telling you. God doesn't do anything without telling his servants, the prophets. And so at that time it was Abraham, and he's like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And then Abraham pleading, hey, if there's 10 righteous. And Abraham had to be thinking, man, there's at least 10 in that city. It's more. It's Sodom and Gomorrah. It's more than one city. It's cities in this plain. He's like, there's got to be 10. Even if there's just one in each, two. I know Lot's there, and pretty.
Yeah,
at least last postcard I got seemed like he was still righteous. Maybe not as righteous as he should be, but I mean, come on, he's.
They not all be there.
Yeah, blood of my blood, and then of course he gets up in the morning and he just sees the. And I like that, going back to verse 20, when God destroyed the cities in the plain, he remembered Abraham. And he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot lived. And so, even his salvation, and that's where, because there's people that would say, well, why didn't God let Lot go to Abraham or send him there? Like Chris shared, one is he probably would have brought the corruption there. The other is that he was saving Lot. He had no legal reason that he didn't have to destroy Lot with the city. He made an agreement with his prophet. If there was 10 righteous, he wouldn't destroy the city. There wasn't 10 righteous, which meant, according to the agreement, he could destroy everybody in the city, the righteous and the unrighteous. In other words, he could have destroyed Lot justly, even after a legal argument in the court with Abraham, his prophet. The agreement was made. So he was pouring out mercy and grace on Lot and his wife and his daughters when he brought them out of the city to begin with. So you can't say God wasn't being merciful, that he wasn't showing grace. Even in his justice, there was still mercy and grace there. I know we want to have these other kind of standards and all this kind of stuff, but he was being very merciful, very just. And it wasn't because of Lot being righteous. It was because of Abraham and God's relationship with Abraham. And God, in our relationship with him, there are blessings that will go out as we have a close relationship with God, blessings that will go out to family members, friends, neighbors, people that we know, that we work with even. And these blessings will go out, not because they're righteous, and some of them may be very unrighteous, but because of our relationship with God and God wanting to bless us, he will bless those that are a part of our lives. It's a natural function. It gets interfered with when we interfere with it by anger, bitterness, unforgiveness, cursing instead of blessing, words that we say, attitudes that we have. We can interfere with that. But the natural function is God's blessing us and blessing others through us, even those that don't deserve it. Because he's so merciful. He's so gracious. What a wonderful thought. What a wonderful idea. What a wonderful thing to think on as